everybody, and thank you for joining us for this edition of MedTech Emerging Minds. And on this edition, I am ecstatic to have Liam Burns, who's the CEO of Qaelon, an incredible company you're going to learn a little more about. So, Liam, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate you having on the show.
Thanks, Joe. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, I've got the chance to get to know you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself for those that don't know you.
Yeah, so I started my career as a United States Naval Officer at a young age on the deck of a ship, and just some incredible leadership experience very early on. And then I transitioned into the MedTech, now the tech med industry, working for Johnson & Johnson. I was lucky to really do every sales, marketing, and leadership job that you can do in a big company. I learned in the Johnson & Johnson framework of leadership, the standards of leadership, credo-based decision-making, and that was just an incredible experience. And then the last job I had at Ethicon was to be part of a startup inside of J&J in the biosurgery division. That was formative and got me very excited about being in innovative companies, startup companies. And shortly thereafter, I left J&J, took all of that knowledge and started applying it in a variety of executive roles in startups, and have been lucky to take a number of technologies through the final stages of development into the marketplace, and most importantly and most fun, into the operating room, working with thought leading surgeons around the world. And that's what we're doing now with Qaelon.
That's awesome. No, I love that J&J. Well, you had a couple great foundations, the Navy in leadership, and then J&J's got an incredible development program, right? And now you took that and learned the School of Hard Knocks of entrepreneurship, which I'm sure was and had some success with that. And I know you're already having some great momentum with Qaleon. So tell me a little bit though more about Qaleon, and first and foremost, what's the problem you guys are solving here at Qaleon? Let's start.
Qaleon is focused on likely one of the most dreaded surgical complications, which is a surgical leak. And surgical leaks aren't even perfectly defined. They're not completely understood. And this is a complex, multifactorial problem. And so Qaleon is bringing leak detection into the digital age with a real-time, quantifiable test that can provide data that drives surgeons' decision-making. And most importantly, if we can discover a leak before the patient leaves the OR, the surgeon has a chance to intervene and avoid all of the horrible and devastating consequences to patients after surgery.
Amazing. So I can't, that's 20% of the time this is an issue, and that's the standard of care. I'm not sure if anywhere in medicine where 20% failure is considered okay, right? So that's
I think there's 2 points of that are kind of important, Joe. First off, the standard of care for leak detection is the air bubble test. That was first reported in the medical literature in 1910. And there is nothing in surgery or medicine or healthcare that we do today the same as we did 115 years ago. And so I think that highlights how important it is to bring leak detection into the digital age. The other problem with the air bubble test, which is similar to what you do to check a bike tire for a hole, you fill the pelvis with saline, you push the bowel underneath water, and you look for bubbles. This is a visual analog test that is not aligned with the precision of digital surgery, robotic surgery, and everything else that goes with that. And so that leads to all of these error-prone or these false negatives, because every time you discover a leak post-operatively, especially the early ones, those probably should have been detected in the operating room. And that's what Qaleon can do. With quantifiable data, in less than 30 seconds, we can identify and confirm the presence of a leak. So a surgeon or a GI physician can intervene, can close it, and avoid the high mortality, the morbidity, the costs. And of course, the worst part about having a surgical leak is that many of those patients end up with a permanent stoma and have permanent loss of bowel function. That happens at an alarming rate when you have an early surgical leak. We hope to move that down as close to zero as possible, because that's what surgeons want. They're trying to avoid a leak. They do everything they can to avoid a leak and are precise and take all kinds of precautions to avoid it. But some of that's out of their hands, and some of it's just not understood by the surgical community yet today.
Yeah. So that's incredible impact. Can you tell me a little bit, how does the technology actually work? How does it do that? If you're not using the old air bubble, what does it do?
So our platform precisely monitors gas concentrations in the surgical cavity. So when you're operating, doing minimally invasive surgery, whether that's laparoscopic, robotic, or endoscopy, you're using CO2 as a means to create an operative field, almost as important as the vision and the camera system itself. The insufflation creates that space for the surgeon to operate. Our technology not only detects surgical leaks by monitoring the gas concentrations. So that environment should be 100% CO2. And when we go to test an anastomosis or test the integrity of the GI tract, if we detect anything but CO2, we know that there's air leaking into the cavity and in through the organ. We precisely monitor those gas concentrations on a second by second basis, so that somewhere between 10 and 30 seconds, we can confirm the presence of a leak and quantify it. What takes it to the next level is the data that's embedded and that's captured in our technology allows us to monitor the profile of a certain leak. That can help us determine the size, potentially even the location. And that's where we can empower surgeons with predictive information, where they can choose, where should I put my anastomosis? Where should I make the transection? Did my closure of a full thickness resection in endoscopy, was it effective, or do I need to go back and close it further to ensure the integrity of the bowel?
Right. No, that's pretty impressive. I mean, you have basically that insufflation device, which is a new and improvement on the existing technology.
Yeah, I mean, insufflation hasn't seen innovation, Joe, since AirSeal was launched in 2009. It is somewhat of a commodity, and all of the standard insufflators, which are pulsed, they pump CO2 for a certain amount of time, and then they stop and sense the pressure, and then they start pumping again. All of the standard insufflators that are out there, besides AirSeal, are not as adaptive to pressure changes in the body. That's why a constant flow insufflator becomes something that can really help the stability of the operative field. It makes robotic surgery go smoother. And not to mention that when you have constant flow insufflation, you can operate at lower pressure, which has been proven to reduce pain, accelerate discharge, and get better outcomes for the patient. So our platform starts with leak detection, and then underneath that is a very high performing insufflator.
Wow. Yeah. So you're not only improving the insufflator, creating less pressure, better fields of vision, but also integrated in there is really something that can kind of sniff out those other molecules of non-CO2, right? To be able to know how much is there, what's that mix look like, and be able to predict what it is, so they can make better surgical decisions in real time instead of operative.
And our technology takes almost no learning curve. In fact, when we've done demonstrations with leading surgeons that are external to Qaelon, we actually do not train them on the device on purpose. Part of this is learning about the user experience that will go into our development. What we've seen is that it is so intuitive that even without training, surgeons recognize right away. And you know it because the minute they see the O2 go up and the CO2 go down, they lean into the screen looking for where the leak is. And that's how intuitive the system is.
That's awesome. Speaking of intuitive, tell me about how this has with robotic surgery, and how you mentioned before it was a very visual test. How does that work in robotics?
To do the air bubble test is fairly difficult with the robotic setup. And certainly robotic surgery is about precision and about data. And so now by integrating our platform with a robotic system, you have that data right at the fingertips of the surgeon. They don't have to compromise on the ability to do an actual leak test. Many of the leak tests now are also done with a flex sigmoid camera. Again, that's another version of a visual analog test where you're looking for a defect. And if the defect is 1 millimeter, that's extremely difficult to see.
Mm-hmm.
And so by bringing quantifiable data, we essentially are making something visible in data that the naked eye can't always see. Even with years of experience, they can't see it. And we want to bring that clarity and transparency to leak detection. That is aligned with everything that robotics stands for, which is precision surgery, using data to make better decisions, assisting the surgeon with information that right at the console, right at the moment of treatment, they can change their pathway. And we will track that in our clinical trials.
That's great. That's great. So speaking of clinical trials, where are you guys on the path right now?
So we did something unique as a startup company. Before we put our scientific advisory board together, which is the leading key opinion leaders that can guide how the product is used, the workflows and things like that, we actually created our data advisory board first. This is a group of surgeons and data experts that are passionate about leveraging the power of data and AI to make better clinical decision making. So our board has members from a contract research organization who's an expert in clinical research. We have leading surgeons that are focused on how to use data to improve outcomes, to improve clinical practice guidelines. We actually also have a member from a leading medical malpractice insurance company who is just as focused on avoiding leaks as we are, the patient first, because we know the devastating clinical outcomes, but they're focused on helping surgeons make good decisions, reduce risk to the healthcare facilities. Unfortunately, there are plenty of lawsuits that happen around surgical leaks. Surgeons are doing everything they can, and sometimes that's not enough.
Yeah.
And so by having more data and getting more transparency about the problem, they can act preemptively before the patient is out of the OR and is fighting for their life with an infection that comes from a surgical leak. So that data advisory board was put together first. Now we are also building with world leading clinicians on our scientific advisory board. And so our hope is that combining those two groups, you have the data expertise and you have the clinical expertise, all focused on the same thing, which is getting leaks from whatever rate it is. It's been said that the leak rate is 5 or 6% for the last 20 years. And yet new data is showing that the real leak rate is probably closer to 20%. Either way, the surgeons, the data scientists, and everyone at Qaleon is focused on the same goal. We want to get the leak rate to 0. And I will tell you, that's a personal mission. I've chosen to be in healthcare because I have people in my life and close in my family that have some medical challenges, some of which are in the GI space. And I know that surgical leaks is something that they may have to face at some point in time in their life. And so this is kind of a personal, passionate mission to impact that. I was never going to be a surgeon. I got a D in organic chemistry. I wasn't smart enough to get through that, much less med school and internship and all of that. But this is how I can contribute. This is how I can help the people that I care about. So it's definitely a personal mission as well as it is a medical mission.
I love how you're, really seeing that is a mission and the impact and seeing that. And that's what I love about being in this industry is being able to, help things get into market that have incredible impact, right, to the market. And speaking of the market, what's the size of this opportunity? What's, the TAM, the SAM, however you want to put it. What is that for you guys?
So I've done a lot of market models over my time in different startups for countless different new technologies. And so we did a very detailed procedure by procedure analysis of where leak detection is needed, what's the penetration and minimally invasive surgery, whether that's laparoscopic or robotic or endoscopy. And so we've dove very deep into that and done a careful analysis. We think the leak detection market is worth over $1 billion. And that's probably a low estimate because each day we're working in the lab, and as we get exposed to new surgeons, we're seeing more applications that we didn't think of before. Most recently, we've been talking to world-leading urologists who believe that by checking the anastomosis after prostatectomy, that's something that we can do. We've proven we can do that in the lab. This is a whole new area where the outcomes that can be delivered here by checking and making sure that anastomosis is intact. It's the same principle, it's the same platform and the same technology, but we believe this is a $1 billion leak detection potential. And that's a fraction of what leaks cost the US and the global healthcare system. We're talking about billions of dollars in direct costs with reoperations, with morbidity, with long-term outcomes on cancer being worse. All of those costs come into the healthcare system. And, we're shifting towards a value-based healthcare system. That's the goal of the US. And I think, some of the global medical systems and health systems are maybe a little ahead of us on that. And you're seeing that in reimbursement.
Yeah.
Medicare has implemented 2 programs that emphasize how important staying ahead of complications, and in this case, leaks are. The hospitals that are on the low side of quality measures, one of which is surgical infection rate, and a surgical leak is considered a deep surgical infection. If you're in the bottom 25% of hospitals, you see a 1% penalty on all of your Medicare discharge reimbursement.
Yeah.
I can tell you a major system in California, that cost them $5.7 million in reimbursement. Wow. And at a time when hospitals are struggling to maintain profitability, to provide services to everyone, that's really important. That 1% sounds small, but it really impacts the level of care and the care they can provide.
Yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned before, it happens more than you think. I think you mentioned to me, one of your KOLs wasn't realized that he was on their hospital was on that list,
And these lists are public. So
yeah.
These are hospitals that, the Medicare and CMS is highlighting as ones that need to focus on quality. The other recent change, which goes into effect next year, is the TEAMS concept, which is a bundled payment system for 5 major operations, one of which is major bowel surgery. And what that does is it says that the hospital gets reimbursement for the procedure as a bundled capitated payment that includes all complications through 30 days discharge. Wow. Well, surgical leaks happen in the first, they declare and they occur in the first 30 days after surgery. That's when the costs are there. That's when the horrible clinical outcomes, including death, occur from that. And so this new system from CMS has chosen about 750 hospitals. It's not voluntary. And the reimbursement they get for the procedure has to cover through 30 days discharge, which again aligns with what we're doing. If Qaleon is bringing transparency in the OR, so a surgeon or an endoscopist can act before that patient goes home, we can help avoid all of those clinical complications. If we can help them avoid those clinical complications, we have an opportunity to impact the economics of the hospital. And let's face it, the US healthcare system is under tremendous pressure. And this is one way where we can not only help the patient, we can help those hospitals. And my hope there is that opens up more care for more patients that the hospitals can't reach today.
I love it. I mean, it is that triple win. That surgeon is having more confidence and visibility. That patient's not suffering from complications as a stoma that could last their lifetime, and the hospitals are having economic value. I think it's pretty exciting. So, what's the timeline look like for Qaleon as we sit here today?
Yeah, so we're about to initiate the full development process. We have an 18-month pathway to FDA submission. And then we believe it'll be a 6 to 9 month review period with FDA. So sometime in the next 2.5 years, we will be on the market. What's more exciting for me is that once we finish design verification, we can actually start first in human. And so our goal at the time of FDA approval is to have 500 to 1,000 patients of data that proves a few things. Number one, that our test is very, very accurate. Number two, because we are for the first time ever capturing data on the accuracy of the air bubble test, we will be able to compare the performance of the air bubble test versus our test and inform the surgical community about the sensitivity and specificity of those tests. I think it's well accepted that the air bubble test is error prone, but we're going to quantify it. Yeah. The other part that I'm really excited about, and we've done some work on how big of a study do we need to do. When you power that, it looks like it's 100 to 150 patients. Our goal is to have 5 to 10 times that at the time of launch, which should bring incredible confidence in the accuracy of our system. But we also should be able to track with that data set a impact on using Qaleon and how it affects the leak detection, or how it affects the leak rate post-operatively. And then, of course, the other part is capturing the economic part of that, not in a hypothetical way, but in an actual way. And one more key point about that, our approach is real world evidence. We're not doing a small randomized controlled trial where we pick this really small subset of patients. We want every patient to enroll in this, because that's the only way you can see the really difficult patients and you get a sense of what's really happening for the average surgeon, for every patient. That's why real world evidence, we believe, is so important. Yeah. And then the other part of that we're excited about is our belief about data is transparency and open architecture. We are building a data ecosystem. We're inviting other devices that are part of the cause, or we're got to think about that for a second. We are inviting other companies with devices that are part of the surgical leak journey to join us, and we will share data with them. They will share data with us. But most importantly, we believe we should have an open architecture so that we can share this data and transparently grow understanding of the causes and sources of a surgical leak for the surgical community. To me, that's something that we have to do. It's got to be open, and we've got to share it so that everyone can learn from it.
I love that. And that's incredible. I mean, the impact you're going to, the approach you're having, and I love, you're going to overpower the study so that way you'll have that much more confidence and be able to really shed some light on what the size of the problem really is through the study as well. It's pretty powerful. I'd like to pivot a bit. Liam, you've been a entrepreneur for a few different companies, and a lot of people listening to this are current entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs in business. So can you give us two things? One, what should entrepreneurs do to be successful? And what is the most common mistake? So kind of two questions there for you, Liam.
I think they're actually the same question and the same answer.
Got it. Perfect.
I think that as an industry leader who is not a surgeon, who did not go to medical school, who hasn't done 500 robotic surgeries or 2,000 endoscopy procedures or whatever those numbers are until you become an expert in that procedure, we do not have the clinical knowledge that the people that we are designing products for have. And so what's been embedded in my philosophy from the very start, my training at Ethicon, which was incredible surgical procedure training, I have never stopped learning about the procedure. And here's what happens too often. The rep comes in the OR right about the time the device is going to be used, informs the surgeon, hey, by the way, do this, do that, the buttonology, but they're not really participating in the whole procedure. And so to me, it starts before the procedure even starts. This is personal to me. Every case, I walk up to the patient's face, I take a moment and acknowledge that that's why I'm here. And then the learning starts from that moment forward. Everything the surgeon's doing, the nursing team doing, the scrub nurses, I'm watching every bit of that as if I was going to have to perform the procedure. And so that student of the procedure and everything that's going on, the only way we can understand a surgeon is by understanding every decision that they make over a 2-hour procedure. And so if you're integrated into that and you're learning and absorbing that, that means that you can actually be an advocate when you go back to product development or you go to sales and marketing and say, look, no, Dr. Jones needs this. This is what she is looking for in this procedure. This is what keeps her up at night. These are the things that we have to take into consideration. And there's a great test for that. You sit in the doctor's lounge or the nurse's lounge, and there's an industry person in scrubs, and there's a medical professional. And if you listen in on the dialogue, and you can figure out who the industry person is and who the healthcare professional is, I will tell you that means that I've failed, because I want to have peer level dialogue. I want to talk about the things that are really matter to them, and I want to learn. I ask them to teach me. That goes from anatomy to the steps of the procedure to risks, everything that goes with that. So I think being a student of that is absolutely critical. And the first thing I do when I take on a new project or a new company, or I'm contemplating a new technology, I immerse myself in the operating room, in the GI suite, going through the exact procedure that I'm about to enter and be part of and help guide new technology for that. That immersion, that student is being a student, I think, is one of the most important things that you can do. And here's the thing, you can't stop learning. Healthcare changes every day. You have to keep learning and absorbing that. And to me, that's the fun part. You want to know where I have fun? It's being in the operating room with a thought leading surgeon who's going to change the way surgery is done. And if you can bring technology for that's incredibly rewarding.
I really love that. Always continue to be learning. Realize you only know a segment of the procedure, be curious and understand the whole procedure so you can better understand the true problem, the true issue, right? Recognizing from the patient, all the way to the surgeon, where can we add value, and really being open to that, I think is just tremendous advice. I know I've learned from. And speaking of learning, how do people learn more or be a part of the Qaleon journey?
We're doing a Series A right now, and so there's still a little room left in our financing round that we're doing right now. So if someone's interested in what we're doing, we're on LinkedIn, we're on all the websites out there, and we'd love to add to our team. I think it's been really rewarding that people that I've worked with in the past in MedTech, as well as surgeons and endoscopists and other innovators, have actually reached out to us saying, "Hey, we want to participate in this round." And so we've actually created a vehicle for them to do that as well. And we'll continue to tell our story, anywhere we can. So thank you for giving us this chance to talk a little bit about what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting. I could see the massive impact that it can make. And so I'm glad we could hopefully be a part of this journey and help support it. Thank you so much, Liam, for joining this edition of MedTech Emerging Minds. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.